Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts, Tom Vasel and Sam Healey.
Hey, Tom Vasel.
And I'm Sam Healey.
And special guest,
Zee Garcia. Hey, what's going on? Yay, I'm back.
Okay, that makes this Miami thrice. Anyhow, today we're taking a look at New York 1901, which is surprisingly from Blue Orange Games. Blue Orange Games makes very light family style, usually like dice games or card games. This is not their normal fare.
Right.
This is a game that's a medium weight style game about building skyscrapers, which is a cool concept because I like skyscrapers in the year 1901, so they're not very tall. But they were big back then. Let's take a look at the game. The game is going to take place here on a map of part of New York City, and it's arranged into different districts that are separated by color, green, blue, yellow, etc. And each of these is broken up into smaller pieces. Most of them are 2-slot pieces, but there's some 3 slots, and you can tell those because they have flowers in them, and it's just to show that it's a 3-slot area. There's going to be some bonus cards here, and these bonus cards will correspond to different streets. At the end of the game, for example, in this one, whoever has the most buildings, skyscrapers next to Wall Street at the end is going to get 5 points, and the most next to Broadway, 5 points, etc. There's also a bonus card here. This one, if you have the most of a certain type of building, you're going to get extra bonus points at the end of the game. Now each player is going to have a starting building that goes on the board. This starting building is determined by them drawing a character. This character is here mostly just so you can see what actions you can take on your turn, but they also show where you get a starting building. So this gentleman here, Robert Fletcher, gets a building in the blue area. It shows his symbols here. So if I'm the green player and I picked him as my starting player, I'd put my starting building in that district. I would also get a card that matches that district. Now, once everyone has placed their starting buildings, the game is going to begin. But before we get there, let's look at each player's buildings. Each player has bronze, silver, and gold buildings. You can't build any buildings except for bronze at the beginning of the game. You can't build silver buildings until you've gotten 6 points. The same with gold buildings. Once you've reached 18 points, you can start building gold buildings. There are 4 big buildings over here that anybody can build, including the famous Woolworth building, but those buildings can only be built once you can build gold buildings. Now on your turn you have 2 actions. The first one's going to be pretty used most of the game, and that is you're going to take one of these 4 face-up zoning cards here, which will then be replaced. Once you take this card, you're going to pick any spot that matches that card. So in this case it's a 2 zone in the pink area, and I'm going to put one of my guys in that area, so I say I claim this one. That's mine now for the rest of the game. I might later on claim one that's next to it. I can claim up to 4 of them, but you're going to likely be building. Once you have these, you can build any skyscraper that you're allowed to build. So once you get 6 points, silver and gold, whatever, but at the beginning only bronze. So I could place this one here on top of that. If I own 2 of them, I could even place it on both spots. These I don't need to leave the guys in them because those are obviously mine. They're still part of my zones there. And when you place these, you're going to get that many points immediately. When you build a skyscraper, it has to be next to either a park or next to a street, which is most of the buildings. I mean, that's going to cover most buildings on the board, but you have to do that. And so when you take that action, you are going to take a card, and then if you want to, build a building. Now, you can also demolish a building. If you own all the areas, let's say, for example, I own this 3 block here, and I want to build. I can demolish my starting building with this copper building, since I own both of those areas, and place that and get 5. You don't lose any points when you demolish a building, so there's no reason not to demolish buildings and build new ones, unless, of course, the bonus card says you get the most points for copper buildings. As time goes by, I could demolish it again, put a silver building, and then maybe demolish it again and put a gold, as long as I own all these properties. So having a lot of properties together can allow you to build big buildings, or even, the really big ones, like here, this Metropolitan Life building, which is worth 12 points. And that's really the whole game. You are simply going to draw cards, you are going to take control of the zones, possibly build buildings, or you can demolish buildings. At the end of the game, you will add any of the scores from the bonus cards, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Each player also has 3 cards that they start the game with. If you keep these cards into the game, you get a point, or you can use them. This one here lets you wipe the 4 cards here and draw 4 new cards. This one here lets you draw 2 of those cards rather than just 1, although you can't draw a 3 size one if you do that. And this one lets you build 2 buildings on your turn instead of just 1. First thing I want to say is I love the artwork. This is one of my favorite box covers ever. I don't know why, I just like it. Right.
And as a given, though, there's not a whole lot of artwork in the game itself. The board is good-looking board, and the cards look fine, but there's not a lot of this kind of artwork in the game. There's a few cards.
Yeah, the board
The
is
bonus cards.
the board.
bonus cards.
The board is not artsy; it's functional.
It is.
That's the difference between the two. It still looks nice, but it's
I
not.
think the skyscrapers look good, though.
Nah, they're okay.
The buildings, the
Yeah,
cardboard
yeah.
buildings. Yeah, they do. They do. Again, this cover is beautiful. The game looks pretty good.
As a quick side note about the components, you may have noticed when I was showing it that the things didn't match up exactly in color, but that's because this is an early copy. By the time you get a copy, they should match the colors.
Right.
So, all right, so what do you guys think of the gameplay itself? The drawing cards and building skyscrapers.
The drawing cards mechanic is pretty heavy, in that if you don't get the right cards, you can really get put behind early. If you don't get some of those three tile cards, 3 space cards early on in the game, you can be behind. But it can work out later on in the game, so it's just something to look out for, and it's not really anything I guess you could do about. There's nothing you can really do about it. It's just a luck of the draw type thing. But if you have the chance to get one of those 3 tile cards, take it.
Actually, I highly disagree with it, Sam, here. Yeah. I think that the 3 tile cards seem like they're better, but in reality, it's more important to meet those bonus cards and to form blocks, whether they're 3s or not.
Most of the blocks have 3s in them.
Yeah, and it's not bad to get a 3, but if a 3 comes up and you don't need it and you take it because it's a 3, that's a bad idea.
But 2 3s is the equivalent of 3 2s.
Yeah, but the 3s are never next to each other, while the 2s are. And you have the card that lets you take 2 2s, which is essentially a 4, which could...
I mean, I think ultimately this is the kind of game that seems random. If you just look at it and you go, oh, you flip 4 cards, you get whatever's best. But I think ultimately, if you go into it with a plan, I want to take over this district. I'm next to this street, and this bonus building will fit in there. Then draft for that purpose.
Right.
You know what I mean? And at that point, it doesn't matter if it's a 3 or a 2. You need what you need. And you will work around that if it isn't available now. But I think saying a blanket statement of 3s are better than 2s. No, I'm with Tom on this one.
Okay, let me curtail it a bit then. If you have a 3 and it's where you are going, you should never pass it up.
Oh, well, yeah. That I agree on.
I mean, in that respect, 3s help you a lot better than a 2 does because it lets you corner off more space of the board. That's what I was kind of talking about.
But there are some sections if you're looking here, that section there is all 2s.
Yes.
So you could fit a big building in there if you wanted to. And I think this actually brings up a bigger point. This game, when you play it, feels pretty light. You draw cards, place skyscrapers. I think it's a little heavier than it seems.
Right. Well, I mean, the company itself is pushing the game as what they're calling a family plus game. And I think I agree with that term. The game feels like a Ticket to Ride, but there are teeth there. The game has some interesting blocking ideas. There's some interesting usage of those bonus cards, and when you do it, you should do it, okay? Probably, because they're a point, and the return isn't really worth it for keeping the card.
Oh, yeah, with those 3 cards?
When you do it, really makes a difference. If you're smart with your usage, if you're smart with those bonus cards, keeping an eye on that, keeping an eye on which streets you should be on. There's some stuff here to think about. It's not a brain melter, but it's also, if you play absentmindedly, you'll probably lose.
Yeah.
And you can't kind of get holed up into one thing, and you have to build over your stuff to do well. So you got to kind of get in that mindset of, I'm going to place this here. What am I going to place on top of it later?
Right. Yeah.
And the one thing I thought the first time I played, I thought was weird is the building progression. Like, I've unlocked the middle buildings, the silver. Oh no, I've unlocked the gold. Seemed too early the first time I played. I went, what's the point of this? Just give them all to me at the beginning. Because it happened almost right away, because it's right near the beginning of the track.
The silver ones, at least, you get right away.
Right. But the more I've played, the more I've realized it's really well timed when you get them. You actually, the last time I played, I was just short of the gold level. And I actually had to struggle to go, come on, I need something somewhere to put me over a couple points.
Yeah.
So I can trigger that edge and start building over things. So I thought that was really interesting. At first it seemed like a throwaway idea, but the idea of building over older buildings and when they get unlocked, I also thought was really clever.
The game does allow you to be aggressive. You don't have to be, and you can play a fairly mild game where people are building their own things. But let's say Sam's building a big chunk and there's an area in the middle, and I don't need to build there, but I can just take the card to tick him off. Now, I don't know that I've played it yet where I've done it that dramatically. I've done it if it would help me out, like, this extends mine. But I haven't been like, Zee has that whole area, I'm going to buy one right in the middle of it and then just sit on it.
Well, you have a limited amount of...
to one of the guys that we were playing.
You have a limited amount of builders also.
Right.
Which means if you put a builder out there, you have less control in other places.
Yeah,
of the board,
but I think you can live with 3. I think you can really mess someone over at a critical point. If you're telegraphing what you're doing, like, hey, I'm building this big chunk here, I can be like, oh, really?
You can do that.
You're not going to get out Woolworths there, sir. And those big buildings are a ton of points.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, but that's really thematic. I mean, that's what the game is about. The game's about this time in New York, landlords would buy a piece of land and sit on it and let things build up around them so that people couldn't build where they were and then sell it for a ton of money. That's what the game's really about, Yeah. So I think that's interesting that you could do that.
All right, final thoughts?
I think this is probably a next baby stepper after Ticket to Ride. If you enjoy Ticket to Ride, the set collection that time in that game, you will, and you're maybe getting a little bored with it, this might be a next step for you after that. I enjoyed it a lot, but it's, I guess, a middleweight game for me. I'll give it one big skyscraper up, and then one about halfway as big.
All right. Now I'm a bigger fan of Ticket to Ride, I think, than both these guys. It's like my top 5 games.
Right.
So I don't actually look at this as a step up. I think Ticket to Ride has just as much deep strategy when you get into it. So I look at them kind of as a simultaneous. I think it fits that mid-weight Euro, which I don't think there's enough of those out there that I can introduce to people. The theme is fun. I like the whole skyscraper building it. I mean, with the only problem being is that even though this game's called Skyscrapers, you never actually go up, which is a little odd. It could have been called Apartment Blocks.
This screams for a 3D version.
Well, yeah.
It screams for a 3D version.
And it's blue-orange. They could do it.
Upgrading much?
Okay. But anyhow, I did enjoy it. I find it a very solid, fun style game in that regard, so I will also give it 1.5
Steel gird.
contracts up. Rent agreements.
That was boring. That was a fail.
Rent agreements, he says. Well, I actually like this game more than both of you guys. I think I played it earlier than both of you also, because I played... No, I just mean I've had a longer time to sort of sit on it and think about it, you know what I mean? And I think when I walked away from it the first time, this was like Gamma, so it was a while ago, I felt the same way. I was like, this is pretty good. But yeah, it's pretty good. But the more I've played it, the more I've thought about it, I've had time for it to sort of marinate. I really like it. I think it's a very interesting game. I'd be worried that some people wouldn't find it exciting. It's not like an exciting theme. But for the people that like Ticket to Ride, thinking about, trains is probably about on an equal plane as far as like woo, trains or building, skyscrapers. So I'm going to go with 2 crazy builders up. Because I would never get up there. That's insanity.
Yeah.
2 crazy builders up. I really like the game. I think if you like something like, I hate to keep saying Tickets to Ride, but if you like middleweight family games, check this one out. It's really good stuff. Really good stuff.
New York, 1901.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.